welcome to Paperback Flick. Yeah, so welcome back, everybody. We are talking History of Love by Nicole Krauss, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might have said her name wrong last time. I wanted to ask you first, Ruth, do you get or appreciate Jewish humor?
I feel like I've seen so many things or read so many things with Jewish humor in it that like I've gotten kind of accustomed to it, but and I get why it's funny, especially
Mhm.
when you're from that culture. But like I don't know if I like can call myself any kind of an expert or anything. I don't know a lot of Jewish people in real life. Like I had one Jewish friend in college. So I don't know how accurate these kind of characters are in the book. It seemed pretty consistent with the
Yeah.
other things that I've seen. So I thought the character
Mhm.
Bill Gurski, I thought he was funny. Like he cracked me up. I loved all the old man things he did just to be seen.
Right.
I originally wasn't planning to become an old grumpy weird person when I got older, but he makes it sound fun. He does.
Yeah.
He makes it sound like a good time. I'm like, I do like getting weird looks from people. So,
So my mom is the one that suggested this to me.
okay.
And she's a linguist, and she loved the mom character in the book. She's like, part of me identifies with her, even though she's not, her personality is not really like that mom character, but she kind of identified with like, oh, I get to translate something from Spanish into English that was originally in Yiddish, like, yay. Also, my mom does know Yiddish. I don't know how fluent she would call herself, but she's familiar with Yiddish.
Okay.
And so she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so funny." And when I was reading it, I was I I had to remind myself that like, oh right, this is humorous because if you are not into their humor is dark, but it's kind of depressing. And it's what's the word? Defame.
Self-deprecating. Yep.
Yeah. Self-deprecating.
Yeah, and
And
like also
so,
kind of insult people that you love, but
right,
it's part of the love.
right.
I totally get that. That's like I realize all the Jewish thing. That's totally my family. We always mock each other and criticize each other. So yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed that aspect of Leo's relationship with Bruno.
Yes.
That relationship was very charming and fun, and I
They
enjoyed having that Bruno character there.
yes. That I think Bruno was maybe one of my favorite characters, which when you like you come to realize, and I kind of wondered if maybe it was happening the whole time. I'm like, is he really there? Because no one else is interacting with Bruno.
Mhm.
Very sixth sensey, you know?
Yeah.
And so
When
when
I
he
read
has
it in the book, it wasn't super clear that he
that,
wasn't really there until he said, "Oh, when he's dead," to the girl at the end, and I'm like, "Was he not there the whole time?" And I was like, there
yeah,
were moments where I was like, "Yeah, he doesn't really interact with other people," but there was not a whole lot of indication to say, "Hey, this is his imaginary friend."
right,
Whereas in the movie, they spelled it out for you. They made it more clear. They
right.
also gave you a whole thing with Alma where you got to say goodbye before she died, which isn't in the book.
Right.
So.
And so when I was reading the book, I might have talked about this a little bit before, but like I understand, but sometimes get very aggravated by the time jumps or the person jumps, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because you start out and you're like, oh, okay, so this is Leo. So this is mostly Leo's story, his narrative, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then the another chapter starts with, I did this, whatever. And I'm like, what sense does that make? And then you realize, oh no, this is a girl,
Mm-hmm.
and the times are not clear. And so we're talking about like 1948, and then we're talking about 2006 or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're jumping, and eventually I got it. I got to where I'm like, oh, clearly this is Leo again. Oh no, now it's the girl. Oh, now it's the brother. Like I started
Yeah.
to get that, but there was so much. The whole book is that, and it starts to get on my nerves. And so I told my mom when I was not quite halfway through it, I'm like, I understand where it's supposed to be funny, but honestly, it's just sad. I'm like, everything is just sad and depressing. And it's like, well, if I'm not laughing, or yeah, if I'm not laughing, I'm crying. And I'm like, maybe you just need to cry. Like, like your jokes aren't even funny anymore because it's always so sad, you know? It and that's kind of where I was. And she's like, I promise the payoff is worth it. Which is true. Like there were some things that were just legitimately funny. Like you said, Bruno, legitimately funny. Alma's grandma was like, where's your breasts? You don't
Yeah,
got breasts, you know?
that was funny.
Would it hurt to give her some? Like that is I don't care who you are, that's funny. And but so there is some like lightheartedness that everybody can get, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, it feels very heavy. And even the joke is like, look at my miserable life. I'm a nothing. I survived the Nazis. I lived for years in the forest just to be a nobody that the only people that see me are the people that hate me, you know? And it's just sad. And he's like, but it's a joke. And I'm like,
Oh,
but it's not. Like,
it,
you know,
yeah.
and then by the end, I was so glad that I knew this about him. By the end, I was like, I was like, I don't care what happens with Misha. I don't care about the mom finding happiness. I don't really even care that Isak is dead because you know what? He deserves to have Alma and Alma the girl
Mm-hmm.
that loves him in a way that nobody else in the story was going to love him. Like
Yeah.
she did all of this work, not even knowing what she was working for, not even knowing what she intended to find. And she says that at some point where she's like, I don't even know what I'm looking for. I don't know if I want this for me, if I want this for him. I don't even know who it is that I'm expecting, but she
Mm-hmm.
just felt the need to seek out. And what she found was this man who didn't exist, and yet he existed. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. And
he was
what's
the only
interesting
real
is
one.
like now she's the only person that knows that he wrote that
Right.
book, the other book. He'll probably
Right.
talk more about that one too. But yeah, when I was first reading it, I was like, okay, I was enjoying the personality, and yeah, it had a bit of a darker tone as far
Mm-hmm.
as like his life. You felt a little sorry for him, but
Mm-hmm.
if it weren't for Bruno, you would have felt absolutely horrible for him.
Yes.
And having Bruno made it like, okay, it's okay, he has a friend. But it did make it kind of confusing at first. I mean, I enjoyed the flashbacks when it was clear like whose flashback it was.
Uh-huh.
Um, at times it took a moment to realize who they're talking about. So it took me a moment to be like, okay, where are we in the timeline?
Right.
And then when they started showing uh, Savinus, what do you say his name?
With
Z?
oh Z, yeah.
Yeah. So when they start showing stuff about him, I'm like, okay, so who's this? And like, it sounded from time to, there were things that it was saying over here that sounded like this guy. And I was like, wait a second, so who wrote this book?
Right.
There's
That's what I
names
did
this
too.
guy. And I'm like, but this guy just said stuff. And I'm like, whose story is this? And it was a little confusing at first because you're like, I'm like, I know it's going to make sense eventually. I'm just
Hmm.
waiting for it to start making sense. And then
Right.
you meet the young Alma, and you're like, okay, these are interesting people. Again, circling around this book. And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, so these are people who appreciated the book and then named our daughter after the character. So it's like, okay, where is this going to connect? And eventually it does, but it's still like you're kind of there's a very different flavor between the Alma sections and the Leo sections, and then even
Hmm.
the the
Z, yeah.
V um like little sections are all very different little like just flavors about them. They're
Hmm.
not written the same, whereas a lot of the V stuff was like written from like a biographer's like perspective,
Right.
things that are little known about him. And I thought that was interesting, but also a little odd
Yeah.
because spending most rest of the book in someone's perspective,
Yeah.
like, and then now you're talking about somebody completely third person where you haven't been doing that before. So it was a little off-putting, but I understand why they did that because how else would you get those that little bits of information? How would you know anything about him?
Right.
Yeah, so I was like really curious to see how it transferred into a movie and how they would choose to represent all that. Where would they choose to start? Would they try to tell the story all linearly, or would they keep with the jumbled timeline?
Right. And so, yeah, because the timeline and like I said, the character perspective, very jumbled in the book. And you're kind of supposed to feel that way. You're kind of supposed to feel like chaos and you've got all this information and you don't know what matters. And then in the end, you're like, oh, like there's like a wholeness by the end of the book. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like the more that things start to fall into place, you kind of have the almost that like relief feeling of like, okay, the author knew what she was doing to me, kind of a thing. So the movie, I felt like did a decent job between um allowing a little bit of that chaos and back and forth to exist while also cleaning up a little bit of it.
Yeah, maintaining it.
Yeah. Without leaving you so confused that you felt like you were watching just a bunch of different clips that still needed to be put together. Like, I felt like they did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
But so sorry, this might be a little bit jumping back and forth, book to movie, movie to book.
Well, it goes with the book, so
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
flow with.
Yeah. But so for myself, and I don't know, maybe I kind of want to hear somebody else's perspective on this. For myself, there were characters of the book that I absolutely loved or that I was rooting for or whatever. And then in the movie, it was oddly different.
Okay.
So, like I said, I loved Bruno, and I started to see inklings at some. I think at one point he talks about Leo talks about how he had Bruno got a dog, and this dog would make so much noise and it would poop all over the house, and
Mm-hmm.
took him to a dog park one day, and she
You
ran
bet.
away, and and that seemed so. It felt like a character that needed backstory. And that's when I started to go, huh, is Bruno real?
Interesting.
Like that was the first moment that I was like, and that was pretty well into the book. I think it was relatively towards the end, I think, at least in the back half for sure, that I kind of went, I haven't really seen any of the other people that live in the apartment or the apartment building.
And they don't talk about anybody else.
Yeah, just the lady that died, and it took him 3 days to find her. And that's why he was like, I want to be seen every day. I want somebody I want people to be like, hey, it's been a couple days and he hasn't ordered Chinese. Hey, he used to come in every single day, sometimes twice a day for coffee, and now he hasn't come in all day or yesterday. Like he
Hmm.
wanted people to know that
Yeah.
he existed. And so I got that. And then he's like, oh, and then my friend Bruno, and he's knocking on the radiator. But then he would knock on the radiator and no one would respond, you know? And I'm like thinking about it, and I'm like, every time they go to get coffee together, Bruno never interacts with other people. Um, what's his name? Leo does. He does all the ordering. He might talk to people or look at people or whatever, but Bruno never does ever. And then he just random one day Leo's like, Bruno had a dog, and this dog did this, and I was just like, that's like what you do with a character to make your character more rich and feel more real,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And the concept of like we were running for the train and then he tripped, but then he got right back up and
But
he
then,
was
like,
right there
suddenly
with
he
me.
was right there. Yeah, that's when I was like, "Oh, that was kind of weird. Like, how is he
Yeah.
so fast?" And
And then
then,
he doesn't get on the train with him, and he's like, because he knew I had to do this alone. And I was like, but then he wouldn't. 2 plus 2 is not equaling 4 here, like. And so I had kind of this inkling. And so when he turns around at one point, he's like, you know what? You're not even real. Like I don't remember how he does it. But I don't know if he yells at him in the book or if he just tells the girl. But at one point he's like, he wasn't even real. He died
In the
in,
book, I don't remember saying he wasn't real in the book, but that he wanted him to go away. They're like,
yeah,
get out of here. I don't want you. Go away.
no
I don't want
way.
you anymore. Something like
Yeah, and
that.
he was just gone. I looked and he wasn't there, you know?
So it was like he left, but he wasn't
Yeah,
looking. So it was like it still wasn't super like obvious, but it was still like
right.
I
And
don't know.
I kind of had that like sixth sensey feeling to
Okay.
me, but then, but I had no confirmation of it. I totally expect, because over and over again he would be like, get out of here, you're crazy, you know, and he leaves his apartment or whatever, storms off in a huff, and then he comes back later. Like, because that kept happening, I kind of thought maybe this is just their dynamic, and maybe he's gonna say, you know, get out, I don't want you here anymore, and then he's gonna show up at his apartment or whatever, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so I kind of thought, well, we'll see if that happens. And then he's like, Bruno died in whatever 1941 or whatever, and I was like, oh, like,
Uh,
you know? But so yeah, so that kind of, I
yeah, I
like
just feel like they did that
even,
a little better in the movie. Like it was a
yeah,
little more clear. There were
yeah,
like little clues with the Bruno here and there that he wasn't really there. And then they
yeah.
did actually have him finally, say
They did,
you're not even real, whatever, and that I made you.
right. They did the classic where, like, you see Leo walk up to a desk, and then suddenly when he's talking, Bruno is there. And you're like, oh, well, maybe he just wasn't in frame as Leo walked up to the desk, as they walked up to the desk. But you
Hmm.
keep seeing that. When the woman, the publicist, when she looks at him, she sees Leo. And then when Bruno is like off to the side and he's like, tell her you wrote it or whatever, and he's like, shush. The lady's like, okay,
What's going on here?
crazy, you
Yeah.
know? And so they make it a lot more clear. And yeah, he does have that moment where he's like, you know why you didn't sleep with her? Because I made you up. You didn't exist. You were dead. You know, like,
Hmm.
he made it really blatant at that point,
Yeah.
which watching the movie, I feel like even if I hadn't read the book, I would have gotten that in
Hmm.
the movie.
It would have made sense. They were like, oh, okay, I get it
Yeah.
now. Like,
Especially like in the book, even him meeting him, he like does the whole like where he like walks by him and then he's like,
was that him? And
Bruno, you know. Whereas
yeah,
in the movie, he like is walking around and then he just suddenly stops and he turns around and goes, Bruno, you know, and like,
yeah,
oh,
see him
like,
go past him. So that's part of what was
yeah,
a little more like, wait a second, in the movie. So I think they did a little better job than the book did
yeah,
because like I didn't feel like it was super obvious in the book that he wasn't alive. There were
yeah,
like little weird things here and there, but like I didn't really get the sense that he wasn't there until
yeah,
the train station, really. When
yeah,
he did some weird things, I was like, how did he get there so fast? He's an old man. Like
yeah,
he tripped and was over there. So like there were moments that I was like, huh, but
yeah.
not like to the point where I was like, he's not real.
Well,
Um,
and I kept waiting
yeah.
to see Bruno's perspective. And we never saw Bruno's perspective because he didn't have a perspective.
I think it was supposed to be V or Z or whatever his name is. Um, and that it was he was the one that was actually working as an obituary.
Right,
It was Leo Gurski was the friend who
right.
was, I think he was a janitor or doing something else, but like he'd written all this stuff of his own, like made up his own like obituaries on the side for all these famous people that had lived. And then he wrote his own, and then V kept it. That's right, because he took it, so
He
like it
took
wouldn't
it.
come
I
true. Then he
didn't,
kept it, and then when he published the book, he put it in the very end of
right.
the book. That's right.
I
So
didn't think it, I didn't think it was Leo that wrote the obituary.
yeah.
And at the point that that all happened, I don't think I had quite figured out who everyone was yet. And I remember like when I read that and I'm like, why is he freaking out about Leo Gursky? I'm like, I don't understand. And then the very next chapter that we read, um, he says his last, or somebody says, is this Gursky? Leo Gursky? And I'm like, oh, wait, what? Like, I think at that point I hadn't quite made the connections that I needed to make. And so
Hmm.
I was like he reads this obituary and then he's like saying a prayer and the rest of his life he's saying this silent prayer. I'm like, why? Why is Leo Gurski so important? And by the time I realized who Leo Gurski was, like by the time I remembered,
You've already connected the dots, so then
I
the
had
last,
connected that dot. So yeah,
yeah,
I was like, this is just odd. There's too many like,
little things going on. Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's what I was confused about when I first read it. I was thinking that the Z character in the past, so wrote the obituaries, I was thinking for a second that was Bruno. That's what confused me. So I
Oh,
thought for a second there was a Bruno moment,
right.
but because we didn't really get introduced, so I think that's part of the problem. Part of what makes it so confusing, but also, I guess, chaotic and interesting, is that
Mhm.
you don't actually meet these characters like officially, like in
Right.
a clear sense. So you didn't meet Leo and Alma and Bruno and Zvi all back in Poland. You didn't really
Right.
meet them. You just saw little snippets and little moments between him and her, mostly in flashbacks. You didn't see,
Hmm.
like, you didn't get introduced to them as a group of friends, you
Right.
know? So that's one thing, again, they did in the movie that I did appreciate is you get a sense that they were friends. Um,
Right.
yeah, in the book, it sounded more like it was just her and him that hung out, and he was friends with the guys on the side. Not that they were all in love with her at the same time
Right.
or
Well,
anything.
he does have one moment that he's like, I remember I left her house after showing her my work,
Yeah,
and I remember Bruno waiting to show what he had written.
what he had written. Yeah.
And yeah. And also like when he would describe her, like meeting her and also kind of just the different interactions, like by the time they're older teens, clearly he's absolutely in love. She is at least quite happy to roll around with him, right? And then like I kind of got the feeling that at least younger her was a little manipulative, like which
Hmm.
they do kind of show in the movie too, where she's like, Leo, I'll marry you for the first 10 years, and then I'll marry Bruno. And Z, even though you're older, I'm gonna wait and marry you last, but that means you get me for the rest of our life, or whatever she says there, something like that.
Okay.
And I remember thinking like it kind of held back to holes when we were talking about holes when she's like, hmm, which one makes more money or whatever. Like she's like, let's
Mhm.
see, how do I choose between two guys? And he's like, you
Yeah.
know what? Screw you. Have a happy life. I'm out. I expected something like that. Like I expected these guys to be like, are you kidding me?
You're
Okay,
making a fight over you?
you're not the only woman in the world. If you're the only woman in this village, then I guess I gotta leave the village. Like, you know what I mean? I expected that. And instead they were like, what? No, me first, or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah, that was,
what kind
I
of
get
pull does she
why
have on
they
that?
did that. So we kind of got our real introductions to all the friends.
Hmm.
But it was also kind of like, that's not the feeling you got for the book at all. That, yeah, there
Right,
was a little bit of manipulativeness in the book as far as like, like how she would respond to the stuff he wrote and be like, well, I don't like when you get too fantastical or like,
right.
yeah, it's just her opinion, but there was a little bit of a like,
Yeah. Well, and
I don't
even
know,
when,
kind of a almost a coldness to how she reacted to things.
yeah,
Yeah.
like she was not as into him as he was into her, especially when they were younger. I feel like when they were younger, she had a lot of that. Like when she was like upset about the moth, and then there was something else when he would like watch her and she's like, why are you watching me? And he's like, I love you, marry me. And
You
she's
may,
like,
I'll consider it.
see. And like I understood that part of that might be like because we're 11 and you sprung this on me and I don't know what
Yeah.
to do.
I'm a little
You know,
young yet, so give me some
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Like I get that. I get not just being like, like, but then
Hmm.
I was like, so she knew that she kind of had him wrapped around her finger,
Yeah.
and then she would be like, oh, that's too real and boring. Oh, well, now you just made everything up and it doesn't feel real. And
Yeah.
maybe
It's
she's
like
trying to
she's
make
trying
him
to run in
better.
circles.
Yeah, like, is she trying to genuinely make him better, or is she just being like, little to the left? Oh, now a little to the right? Like,
How far can I push this guy? Yeah.
yeah.
it
And
could
then,
be just the whole feminine, like wild power, like, ooh, I have all this power over this man,
yeah,
and there's some kind of like high off of that, an evil high, but still.
yeah,
Um,
I didn't feel that a lot in the book, but I did kind of wonder if that's where it started. You know what I mean?
mhm.
And then when he comes to America and he finds her in the book, it felt a lot more like, dude, what we had was great. Also, I have a happy life now. Please don't blow it up. You know,
We went
whereas,
that big a deal. We slept together a couple times, which is,
right,
in itself is feels a little. Okay, so I know that like there were always people who were sleeping out of wedlock throughout history, but I always got the impression that Jewish culture, especially back then, was a little more traditional in the you wait till you get married,
right,
not so loosey goosey. So, and that would have been considered like almost like they were secretly married, or they, in a sense, that's like a promise.
right,
Um, it seemed the idea that they slept together before she went to America, before they got married, just that's a little weird for me when they do that in period pieces because it wasn't as
right,
popular a notion as it is now.
right. And
Especially
it might have been like it fits in like the court, like when they're talking about um like royal courts or big cities or whatever. I feel like that probably fits in more than when you're in a rural,
small town.
conservative,
Everybody
Polish
knows everybody,
town.
and you're
Yeah,
all religious. It's the same religious group for the most part. Yeah, I think
right,
in that culture, it's not as common, especially not in that time.
right.
So, like, it
And
might have been more common, yeah, in America, but I have a hard time imagining that happened a lot with Jewish Polish people,
right,
at that time. That
maybe,
just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, yeah, I'm
right,
not
maybe.
saying it's impossible, but there's part of me that was really kind of shocked that they supposedly slept together.
Well, and especially when she comes to America, to New York City,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Oh no, this poor girl, she just had a baby out of wedlock. Good thing that guy was around to marry her right away,
Yeah,
the employer's husband." And I'm like, "Well, if it was a big deal in America, in New York City, then it had to be a huge deal where they were."
in
Like
Poland. Yeah.
it just didn't, but it happens. I get like, but the concept that she would just be like, "Bud, my life is good now." I'm like, that woman never loved him.
Yeah, that's what I liked better about the movie is there was more of an emotional
Yeah,
meeting, and it was more of a, I cared so much for you and I waited for you, but I have a life. I moved on.
yeah,
And, as much as part of me will always love you, I have a life. I have
yeah.
a husband and another child. I can't go back now. And,
And
if I
she
had
says,
any idea you were alive,
yeah,
but
she
so
might have
I
said
like
it.
that about the movie is they gave her more personality in the movie.
Yeah,
'Cause in some ways, the book left her very like, oh, she's just so beautiful. Like they
mhm,
didn't give her a lot of real personality traits, other
right.
than she seems a little bit cold or like maybe reserved,
Yeah,
and didn't get a lot of like why he was in love with her, other than like something about her as a person, or like he
yeah.
made a connection with her when he was younger and he never let it go. Like she was his first love and he never got past it.
Yeah. So from what I got from the book after I'd completely read the book and had not yet watched the movie, what I kind of felt like was he lived in fantasy. The Alma Mermensky of Leo's mind was impossible. She could have the real Alma Mermensky could never live up to the romanticized version of her that he had created in his mind. That's kind of how
Mhm.
I felt. I After reading the book, he dreamed up all of these things for himself that were not real. And the few times that he had reality, he wrote The History of Love, it got stolen from him. He survived World War II in Nazi infested Poland, living in the forest through
Mhm.
winters and for years,
Yeah.
just to be a nobody and a nothing. He wrote what's the other book? Words for Everything,
Yeah.
to the son that he never got to parent. Like he
Yeah.
never got to be involved in his son's life. And then whether it was truly Isaac, or whether it was maybe his manager, his brother, somebody turned in this manuscript and gave Isaac the credit. And so
Hmm.
again, like his second masterpiece, and they were like, this might be his best work ever. And Leo's like, it was mine. Everything
Yeah.
in reality gets taken from him. In reality, he loses always.
Hmm.
But in his fantasy, in his imagination, he has the best friend that anyone could ever have.
Hmm.
He has the woman that is there's a reason that he calls her the most loved woman in the world,
Hmm.
because he has created an Alma that is undeniable,
Yeah.
even though she doesn't really exist. And so the real Alma lets him down, because of course she does, because no one can live up to what he has created. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I took from it. The
Hmm.
movie
Yeah.
was a little different, but the book made me feel that way very much.
Yeah. Yeah. There was definitely a huge difference between reality and his fantasy. But in some ways, he needed that fantasy to be able to live, to be able to survive the
Yeah,
living force during the war, and to survive all the hard things he had to go through.
yep.
So that literally kept him alive. And even in the end, when he's older and he creates Bruno,
Hmm.
again, it's to help him survive. Like he
Yeah.
can't just be alone, doesn't want to just be alone, so he creates Bruno. And I do like the touch the movie added where like it was Alma that asked him to like find somebody. I do like
Hmm.
the cute little montage of him going behind her husband's back to go
Right.
and visit her.
Well, and he did do that in the book, but she was on life support.
Yeah, so they weren't having interaction.
Yeah,
They weren't having moments together.
right.
I did like that layer, whatever, that he got to do that with her.
Hmm.
And that he felt inspired by her being like, "Oh, don't be alone. Find somebody." That he invented Bruno so he wouldn't be alone. And I like that, and I get that, that sense of necessity. Like sometimes we create things that we can hold on to just to survive, just to get through.
Hmm.
And I think especially in his life with the situations he was in, his imagination was his life. That's what's kept him alive. That's what
Yeah,
made life possible.
yeah,
And yeah, it's a sad, tragic story to think you're never going to get to know your son. And he never fell in love with anyone else. He probably never tried. It's a sad story, but at the same time, there's like a weird poetry to it. Like,
yeah.
I do want to say that I like the Alma of the movie better than the book, but then,
The younger or the older?
um, okay,
The
sorry.
Polish one?
The Alma he's in love with, I liked better in the
Yes,
movie than the book. The
yes.
Alma, the young girl, I liked better in the book than the movie.
Me too. Okay, I wanted to make sure that point was made, because I agree 100%.
Okay, so let's talk about young Alma and her whole story. What do you think?
The Alma in the book, I loved watching her mature.
Uh-huh.
She starts off as a very immature girl. Do you know what I mean? Like her obsession, like I understand her dad died young, her mom, it broke her mom.
Yeah.
There's kind of a thing like I don't remember how it was said now, but to live entirely for yourself is a wasted life, but to live entirely for someone else is also a wasted life, because we're mortal. And if you live entirely for yourself, then you're just selfish and shallow, and your life is
The way to meeting.
ultimately, yeah, but then if you live entirely for someone else, then they die or they let you down in some way, because we all will, because we're human, and you're broken. Like your purpose in life was over. Leo, to his credit, he lived for the Alma in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the Alma in reality let him down, he could create a way out of that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
He still
And
the idea.
yeah, whereas Alma's Alma the younger,
Alma the
Oh man, if it's funny to you, it's funny, and if you don't get it, it's fine. But
Yeah, it's a yeah. Never mind.
but
Um,
um, but yeah, Alma, the
the girl.
modern Alma, she watches her mother be broken, and
Hmm.
because her mother is broken, and that's what's raising her and her brother, they
Yeah,
are also broken because they don't know how else to be.
yeah.
And so Alma processes it, obsessing over her dad. She wants to be a survivalist like her dad, and he is the ultimate hero and whatever.
Yeah.
And I liked watching her be a girl who's trying to essentially raise herself because her mom is
Her mom
not
should overcompensate at the same time, failing miserably to just do the basics. Like,
right.
she's just not in the right place. And, instead of getting help to deal with what she's dealing, what she's feeling, she's
Mhm.
kind of just recluse. And then when she does come out, it's just to be, her whole intellectual thing to work on a book or something. And so she just
Right.
focused on that. So she's
Right.
kind of,
She's the epitome of trauma-induced manic depressive personality. Like that is the mother.
mhm,
She suffered a trauma in her husband dying, and she is this manic because you watch her be manic sometimes,
mhm,
and then you see how utterly depressed she is, even in her mania. Like, you know what I mean? And it's awful. Like I feel for the mother and I feel for those kids.
go for
And
those, yeah.
I watch as like as Alma specifically as she is kind of maturing out of it, and she the one thing that she keeps holding on to, even as she kind of lets go of the obsession with dad and she gains her new obsession of seeking out this person, even though she doesn't know why, and it kind of changes who it is that she's seeking out in the first place.
Mhm.
But she's grasping for something, for a wholeness that she knows she doesn't have. But you watch her mature and you watch her start to think things out differently, and you see that the worries that she has become more adult or more mature worry, and you see her brother kind of follow in her mom's footsteps.
Yeah.
Like he decides he's become this.
The Lovnik ball kick, like I
It look yeah, it looked
it
like
was
lamed.
Lovnik ball kick, something like
Yeah,
that. Like
yeah,
listening
and
to it being read in audiobook, like I was like, okay,
yeah,
um,
the word looks like lamed, but
yeah,
I knew that because I know a little bit about Yiddish and Hebrew, I knew that it was lamed, like or lamed, or however I
mhm,
understood that it was that, and then vovnik or something like
yeah,
that.
like
The,
Bolshnik or Bolshnik.
yeah,
It was nice to hear it in the movie too, because it was like, okay, that's how it sounded in the audiobook. So
yeah.
it was nice to see it written out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was reading,
Hmm.
and I said it a little bit differently every time I said it in my head. But you could hear, like you could see it, especially in the book. You see him just be like, he doesn't have any friends. He's a little bit weird. He gravitates toward the maintenance guy or the gardener or the janitor or something. I think he
Yeah.
was a janitor
Cool.
at the school. And I've known those. I mean, I've had children that are those kids. I've had friends that I'm kind of friendly with them, but they follow this teacher around or whatever. Like I
Hmm.
never really become good friends with them because they have this adult that they cling to or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I've known those kids that are just like, it's never stated, but in reading it, this kid is desperate for a role model, for a father figure. And Alma wants her mom to be a little bit not crazy. Like
Yeah.
dad reined mom in, and now dad's gone. And so that's why she wants a new dad, right? Someone else for mom.
If she's something else to focus on, she can
Yeah,
stop feeling so sorry for herself she lost dad. More like she
right.
had life to live or something.
For the boy, he's growing up without really any authority figure, and specifically without a dad or a father figure.
Yeah.
And he goes
Which is
looking for it,
really
and
important.
he finds it in this janitor at the school who is very traditional, very conservative, and kind of
Yeah.
also outcast. Like he's a janitor and he's
Yeah.
like that gross guy that, you know, kind of identifies with him. And whether it's this guy's influence generally or whether it's something he specifically says, the brother, he becomes this possible messiah in his
Mm-hmm.
own mind because
So he
Hell's,
needs a purpose. So he's
yeah,
creating a purpose for himself. Where like he has special purpose. So like he doesn't feel like he's meaningless, like he doesn't matter.
yeah.
In a
And
way,
it
he
gives,
feels a little invisible.
right, it gives a place for his anxiety. Of
Yes.
course he feels anxiety because he has all of this on his shoulders. No 10-year-old boy should feel this anxiety unless they're responsible for the whole world.
And he feels like he can't rely on anybody around him. And he sort of relies on Alma. But at the same time, she's sort of trying to figure out her own stuff.
Right. And she lies to him.
Yeah.
And it's usually like a lie of love, like
Mm-hmm.
I want you to love dad. And so, I don't know the truth, so I'm just going to make something up. But he starts to see that. I feel like you get the sense in the book, especially, that he's starting to feel, even if he doesn't quite know, that Alma, she's not being
Yeah.
honest with him. And I love the way that so towards the end, he like goes back to the gardener or the janitor,
Mm-hmm.
and the janitor is upset and crying over Bird because the Lamedvovnik, whatever, they don't get the credit, like they don't take credit for what they're doing. I forget how he says they work in secret or they work in the quiet or whatever it is. And he's like, you're right. I've been telling people that I'm this great thing.
But
I've
announcing it.
been, yeah, I've been trying to do this grand thing of building an ark.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what can I do? And so what he does is helps Alma find her wholeness. He sets up the meeting that they eventually meet. And I love that. That was so beautiful. I cried when I read that. Towards the end of the book, there were several parts that I got like that little bit emotional. And I'm like, oh. And
Yeah.
then when I actually read her conversation with Leo, and he is telling not only her the truth, but he's telling himself the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I started to actually cry. Like I had to like move back a little bit so I didn't because it's my mom's book. And I didn't want to like get tears on it,
Yeah.
which she would not have minded because the fact that it made me cry is like, yes, like because the tragedy of his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And you see her desperation. She doesn't even know what she's looking for anymore, but she can't stop looking. And you finally see the resolution. And
Mm-hmm.
and it made me emotional.
Yeah.
And the fact that the brother did that, he did it.
Yeah. He
He,
did help. He connected
yeah,
them together. And I love that he
he,
sent the book to Leo. And he's like, why is this in English? I wrote it
yeah.
in Yiddish. Where is this coming from? And so, and he thought it was gone forever. So like that whole feeling of like losing something. And as a writer, I know how can like attached you become to your work, especially
Mhm.
if you've been working on it for a long time. And then to lose it, like if like your computer died or like you lost a flash drive or whatever, or something crashed, like it's devastating to think that that work is gone.
Mhm.
Because yeah, you could try to rewrite it, but not every moment's going to happen quite the same, and that's exhausting.
Yeah.
So, and I have had to do that before, where I had to start rewriting something that I'd lost. And this, then that's just fictional stuff I made up. This is stuff that's very personal to him. To have
Right.
lost that, what he wrote for Alma, for his love, that's got to be
Yeah.
devastating. So, like that feeling when he reads, he finds the book and he's reading the book, it's like, oh my gosh, I've cried.
How
So like,
it
how
it was a
amazing feeling to be like, my book is
yeah,
back.
it was a miracle. It
Yeah.
it was a miracle. all of the things that the brother does at the end, it's all a miracle. It
Hmm.
makes completeness out of at least these two lives, right?
Yeah,
And I loved that. I felt like they kind of took it away from him in the movie.
they did. Yeah.
They really took a lot of his value as a character away in
Hmm.
the movie. And I it bugged me, but also there were other things that bugged me about the movie that I
The movie?
almost didn't see it. Huh?
About the movie or the book?
About the movie.
Okay.
The the book I ended up liking a lot. Once I finished it, I was like, yep, I like this book.
Yeah.
Most of the way through, I'm like, this book is trying my patience.
Yeah. I liked a lot of things about it. I thought it was well written. It was interesting. It was funny. Like some of the characters were funny. They weren't like laugh out crazy hilarious
Right.
moments, but the characters were interesting.
Hmm.
Um, but then like when it started making sense, I was like, okay, I get what's going on here. This
Yeah.
is a good book. But with the movie, so I thought it was interesting for them to like immediately introduce young Alma um, and Leo in the same timeline, in the same
Yeah.
universe, in the
Well,
same New
and
York. When you're reading the book up until like towards the end, you're not entirely certain if Leo exists in her timeline because
right,
you knew his time, but you weren't quite sure where she was in time for a
right.
while because they didn't spell it out for you. So you're like, are they in New York at the same time, or is this a different timeline? It's like because they'd
Yeah.
already done that a few times, so it was a little confusing. But so they immediately introduced, they put her in the art class that he
So
modeled for.
they do mention in the book that the Uncle Julian, he gives her a thing for art classes, whatever, and she does mention that it was called like life through art or art in life or whatever it was, and
Hmm.
it was sketching
Naked people.
his models. And so you do make that connection. Oh, that Leo modeled for.
I got what they're trying to do with the addition of the random friend. So she
Hmm.
had someone to talk to and explain what was going on. So, like,
Right,
because in the book, it's all in like a journal she's writing, you know?
right.
And same thing with Bird. He's writing in a journal about, what's going on with him. I get that they were trying to find a way to do that without her writing in a journal in the movie. To
Right.
create a friend that she has to say everything to. And so it's more of a visual thing. And I get
Yeah.
that. I just think they could have maybe made a better character.
Yeah. I didn't like the
She
friend.
she wasn't, I don't know, she wasn't awful and she wasn't great. Like, I
I'm
feel
not gonna
like she
lie.
was just kind of,
I didn't like Alma. I did not like the younger Alma. I
hmm,
don't know if it was just the actress, the way that she speaks, or I just didn't like it. I felt like she was just a cheap version of what was in the book. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. She seemed almost too abrupt or too unfeeling
Yeah.
and like harsh. I was like, yeah, the young Alma had a little bit of that, but she wasn't like that harsh.
Right.
Like she
And
was awkward because she's figuring stuff out. I do like the aspects of the Misha story in the book and what that brings to her story and how that
right.
helps her grow up. But and I get that they wanted to bring that like the relationship into the movie. They tried to bring it all like center stage and make him more important than
Right.
he was. Um, I guess it's not a terrible thing, but to have that be what Bird is worried about, that he write her back and that
Yeah.
would get fixed is shallow compared to him helping her find
Right.
Gurski.
And he had nothing to do with that ultimately. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, he was like, respond. And then the guy's like, are you okay? On Facebook. Great. That's great. And maybe he does feel like, oh, I did it. But he didn't actually actively do anything.
you do anything.
Like in the book, when he sent Leo the
Mhm.
translation and he set up the meeting and like I loved the brother in the book and in the movie he was just annoying.
It's hard sometimes to take a character that's like that and then translate it to film, especially with
Yeah.
a young actor when the character is a child. You have to find an exceptional child actor that can
Yeah.
act sort of a unusual character with like the right gravitas. I mean, not everybody can do that. And once in a while you find those young actors and they can. But like he tried to play it as best he could for,
Yep.
like kind of doughy-eyed, like sort of lost, kind of,
Yeah.
not so much like I got the bird in the book felt like he knew what he was doing. Even when he was doing weird things, even if it seemed like it was crazy and he didn't know what he was doing, he was convicted, had conviction. And he was very serious. He didn't come off as some wild-eyed dumb kid. Like, yeah, sometimes he'd want his sister to tell him more about his dad. It's like, tell me more about dad. But like, I didn't get the sense that he was like this, tell me more about dad. Like, kind of
Yeah.
a, like, yeah, he was missing his dad, but like, it felt like just his whole mannerism was more like, not so much stoic, but more like, and not serious, just more confident,
Yeah.
a little more sure of himself
Yeah.
than the characters portrayed in the movie. And I think that just didn't quite work out. Plus, like, you're shoving all these character moments into a movie, you lose a lot of those
Yeah.
things that you get from,
Yeah.
and Bird's character particularly, because he's one of the smaller characters, I feel like they lost a lot of what made him interesting in the
Yeah.
book.
And I kind of felt the same. So, two other characters that I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to talk about. The mom, the
Hmm.
mom in the movie, so it's played by Tori Higginson. Hey, I love that actress.
Oh yeah,
I
so
I've seen her
I don't think
mostly,
I've said anything.
so I've seen her mostly in sci-fi TV series.
Oh okay.
I've seen her in a couple other movies too, and she usually plays a smaller character. But like I know she did Stargate Atlantis. She was like Dr. Weir, like the main like leader of Atlantis. And then there's another sci-fi movie had something to do with ley lines. She's done a lot of what I've seen has been a lot of sci-fi, kind of maybe not as mainstream as some other actors,
Okay.
but I've always loved what she brings to the characters. I thought her portrayal of mom was fine,
Mm-hmm.
but of all of the things I've seen her do, this might have been the worst that I've ever seen her do. And it might just be because that's what she had to work with.
Yeah, I
But
feel like they gave in the script, she doesn't have as much of a personality as she does in the book. And I love that whole part in the book where the mom's trying to figure out all the different things the daughter could be, like genealogy and like DNA wise. She's like,
yeah,
well, you could say you're like this, you're this much Polish and this much German, and you're this, blah, blah, blah. And like, I found that fascinating at the same time, like just a wonderful example of just how like off her rocker she
yeah,
is. That
little
became
ADHD in
obsessed
there.
with that became what was important, not what was happening with her daughter right there. Like her mind went off on this little tangent. Interesting
Yeah.
as it is, but like I thought, yeah, that's really interesting. You could think of all sorts of different
Yeah.
combinations, considering how all those territories changed over time.
And then for Alma to go, I'm American. Like, I love that moment where she's like, you came from wherever and dad came from wherever and their parents and blah, blah, blah.
I
I'm
grew up,
American.
yeah,
And she
those
doesn't,
are part of her history, but she's like, this is me.
yeah. Well, and she doesn't have like my family, we know that we're Scottish. We know that we're French. Like there's a lot of that background in my history. My growing up was like Scottish American, like whatever.
Hmm.
We kept a lot of that. We kept a lot of our um French, Scottish, a little bit of Irish, like traditions alive, family crests, like these kind of things, right? For her, she's just an American Jew who has been raised by an American Jew who off her rocker. Like she doesn't have any of that. Like to suddenly be like, well, you're part Polish and you're this and you're German and you're what? And she's
Yeah,
like, no, I'm not. None of those have influenced my life in my lifetime. That's not my experience. My experience is not World War II Holocaust survivory. Like none of that has been my experience is dad's a survivalist, but couldn't survive cancer.
yeah.
Mom is crazy. I live in New York City. Like that's her experience. And I love that they had that moment to see where
Hmm.
mom is all scattered and
Yeah,
hyper fixated while she's just scattered, like classic ADHD. As someone who also has that, I saw that immediately. I was like, oh, that's what that is.
yeah. I felt
But
like the mom's just so well written in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And the movie, like I said, I love that actress. And because I love that actress, I was okay with Mom. If I didn't care about her so much, I would have been like, they didn't give her much to work with, but she sure didn't work with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the script for her is pretty bland, and like they kind of took all those great weird moments with the mom. That's one
but
of the biggest problems with making a book into a movie is it's so hard to keep
yeah,
those moments and still tell a story in like a condensed amount of time.
yeah, you have to choose which elements of the story that you're telling. And it often bothers me when we have this much story to tell, but only this much time to do it. And then they put in their own things, which crowds out the actual book. That does usually bother me. I was okay with it in this book in the case of Misha because Alma was, for me, so unlikable that they almost needed to have Misha still be a thing. In the book, you kind of realize that in the end, you don't have any resolution on what happens in that relationship, and it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because she has her family and she has Leo. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, what'll be will be with Misha. It's fine. Either it works out or he was a teenage boy. You know,
It wasn't meant
it
to be.
it doesn't matter anymore. The thing that was so important isn't important because the things of deeper value, the relationships of deeper value are here. And if Misha becomes a relationship of deeper value, great. But you don't care by the end of the book.
Yeah.
In the movie, I don't like Alma. The fact that she found Leo is still great. The fact that he has her is still great.
Yeah.
But she needs Misha to still be part of her life because she's so unlikable to me that I'm like, the Misha in the book did kind of feel like an experience for your life story. And that's all he needed to be. In the movie, he was a good guy. When he was listening to her talk about all of her weird obsessive things, and
Yeah.
eventually like when he's like, you're not even Russian, I'm Russian and I don't care about Russian history. He's like, listen, you're my girlfriend, I'm your boyfriend, because you
Be
know
in the
what, this
present.
this is what
Yeah.
matters. I don't care about Catherine the Great, and I don't care about the other girl named Catherine that I was hooking up with, because I only did that to make you jealous because I liked you from the beginning. How do
Yeah.
you not see that? Like, they have to have that moment, and then Alma still messes it up.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very end, he does kind of reach out again with that Facebook, are you okay?
Yeah,
Kind of
that
a,
little moment.
like, that made Misha an excellent person and a character worth adding to. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, like it does make her more interesting in the movie, and they made him more interesting in the movie than he was
Correct.
in the book.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like it is nice to have a little bit of a sense that oh, maybe they're gonna get back together, maybe it's gonna work out, maybe she's gonna stop being so weird and be able to have a relationship now. Because
Right.
what she's
Or
not noticing is at the same time she's trying to fix her mom, she's also pushing people away, and she's also
right.
making it difficult for her to have relationships because she's
Right.
obsessing so much about these other things rather than appreciating what she has,
Right.
you know?
And she keeps saying we're just friends. And so there is that concept that maybe that Facebook reaching out, are you okay? Maybe that is him just saying, like, you know what? If all I can have is your friendship, it's better than nothing. Like, whether that becomes a romantic relationship or whether he does let her have the friendship that she kept claiming that was
She
all,
wanted, yeah. Well,
like, the
the
fact
thing,
that he did that makes him a good guy.
yeah,
Whereas in the book, it kind of doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's a good guy, you know. But
yeah. It just has a sense
um,
of like it was just a missed opportunity and she
yeah,
didn't react well to that and it's just gone,
yeah,
and there's a sense of loss and kind of a sad thing for like her. And you get that because this is kind of her first love situation
yeah,
and she made a terrible mess of it. And you know what? I totally understand that. I've been that girl So I get that regret, being like, that's not what I should have done. That's not how I
Yeah.
should handle that. But it was more something for her to learn from than like so much about him. Like,
Right.
yeah, he was. So the other thing in the book, they were friends for years, and they had developed this friendship and kind of
Right.
grew up together, like several years of friendship. And so for it to suddenly be gone because he kissed her and she was like, I like somebody else, which wasn't what she should have said. She should have said, I'm not sure I'm ready to have a boyfriend, or this is moving a
Right.
little fast for me. Like that would have been different. But acting like, oh, I like somebody else was like a total shutdown.
Right.
To have that friendship is all of a sudden gone because of that. And because it sounds like he's literally her only friend. Like he's the one she's closest to. Because she
Yeah.
keeps talking about how Bird doesn't have any friends, but she has like one friend.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
so
Bird,
she's totally ignoring all the things that are going on with her while she's trying to fix her mom and her brother.
mhm.
Yeah.
And Bird mentions that at one point. She's like, "You don't have any friends." He's like, "You don't have any friends." She's like, "Yes, I do." And as she says, "Yes, I do," she realizes she kind of doesn't. Misha hasn't contacted her in how months or whatever, you know. And
Yeah.
she's like, "Actually, I don't, but I'm not going to tell my brother," you know. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So that was what's interesting about the book is that, yeah, you feel that loss because she lost her friend, but
Hmm.
it was kind of a lesson she needed to learn. She learned how to better treat people and to know
Right.
what she really wanted. She didn't know what she wanted. And
Right.
so you kind of hope that when she finds Leo and they start talking everything, that they become friends. And she takes him home and introduces him to her mom and says, Mom, this is the real writer of The History of Love. And like
Yeah.
what that conversation would have been like. You kind of imagine like him becoming kind of like the grandpa to these kids and sort of like the dad to this mom. And
That's
that kind of
exactly.
being the nice little ending. But it's
Yep.
okay that we don't see that. That we just get the sense that that could happen is enough.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you walk away with, and that's great. That's fine. You
Hmm.
know, I love that. And even if not, even if they have this beautiful moment on the bench and then
Never talk again, which I don't think
never
is
see it again.
possible. I
Right.
think he's gonna have too much of a connection to her, and she's gonna have be too excited that she finally found whatever it was she
Yeah.
was looking for, and she found a real person. That
Yep.
I think that relationship's gonna blossom and grow. That at least
Right.
they will be close, if nothing else. Leo won't be alone anymore, and she will finally stop searching for something and start developing relationships with people.
Right. Well, and so that was like how brother is looking for a father figure,
Mhm.
essentially,
Yeah,
and mom is just
looking for another intellectual person so she can.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So she doesn't like the guys that the daughter keeps throwing at him because they're not quite what she's looking for. They're not
Yeah. Well,
equals.
and I don't think she's looking for a romantic replacement.
No.
She wants that intellect, that writer's mind. I think she would be very happy to have Grandpa Leo
Oh yeah. I think they
come
would have
over for
wonderful
dinner.
conversations. I think the mom would come alive sitting there talking to him about the books and
Yeah.
talking about all the things she's worked on and everything and talking about her husband, and that would be
Yep.
a fantastic relationship right there.
Yeah. And for Alma, Alma needed to understand real love because she saw infatuation and obsession with her mother,
Hmm.
and she found it repugnant. I don't want to be like, she even said, like, she's like, I don't remember if it was in the book, but it was certainly in the
What love
movie.
is, I don't want to be in love because
Yeah. Well,
it ruins you.
someone at some point, I don't remember book or movie, but they were like, "You are so much like your mom," and she's like, "That's the great." She's like, "I would love to be just like my mom." And then there's that moment of, except for that she depended on this love that lost her, that she lost. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so, and you see that in both book and movie, though I feel like it's more poignant in the book that she is so scared to fall in love because what if she is just like her mom? There's
What
so much,
he's gone? What if she loses him? What if they
yeah,
become their like her everything, and then she just can't handle it?
yeah. And now she has found a true love that is totally different. It's not romantic and it's not infatuation. It's just a genuine, pure regard for this person that she doesn't even know, but she
Mm-hmm.
just has such a depth already with him that
Mm-hmm.
she loves him in a way, like we said, like a grandpa or whatever, that you might not even register if you had grown up with him. If he was crazy Uncle Leo,
Mm-hmm.
inventing people and whatever, like she wouldn't have even loved him the same as she did
Yeah.
after having done all this work to attain him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so she has this deep, real connection, and she can see the man who wrote The History of Love, the man who loved a woman so completely that he actually created her. You know what I mean? Like this version
Mm-hmm.
of her. The man that affected her parents so much that it literally created her.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this man survived all of that because he was in love. What he was in love with may not have been the reality, and he was disappointed in the reality of that love. And you
But
know
he
what?
still did.
He's still going, and he kept going, and he kept doing what he needed to survive
Mm.
and to, in his own way, thrive and to come to this point. Like she needed to see that. She
Yeah.
needed to see that not everybody becomes a wackadoo like mom. They become a different kind of wackadoo, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And I think what Leo needs at the same time is that it's time to finally develop those other relationships. He's been holding on to Alma and his son and
mhm.
that almost life that he almost had for so
Yep.
long. There's like, now you need to actually build a relationship. Your son's gone. Like, he was like, in the book, it said something about like, he didn't realize how much he'd been living for his son.
Hmm.
Like, knowing like his son was out there was what he was living for. I love the whole thing where he breaks into his son's house and all that going through. And this is my son's coat, and this is where he slept, and these are his books, and these are his things. And like it was totally like crazy. At the same time, it was like so sweet, and
Yes.
like I could imagine being like, if I had never gotten to be with my kid my whole life, I'd always saw him from afar, and then I finally got to be in his house and touch his things and be where he'd been. That feeling, like it was, I totally, like that got me. So that
Yep.
they tried to kind of recreate that in the movie, but like it was okay, but it didn't quite have the same feel, you know?
Gravitas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't. Yeah, but I thought in the movie they were gonna make it that he was gonna be there when she was there, and or I even thought that in the book that
I
she
did
was
too.
gonna show up there while he was there, and that's when they were gonna meet. But it
Yeah.
makes more sense the way they actually did it.
It does. And I don't think that he was about to commit suicide in the book.
In the book, I
But
didn't get that sense either.
yeah, I didn't get that, but I did understand that he saw her note. In the movie, that's what he was doing. He was about to overdose on all of those random prescriptions.
Yeah, I don't know that I like
And
that.
I didn't like that either, but it worked okay for
Yeah,
what the movie
I don't
was.
feel like that's Leo,
Right.
you know. But
Yeah, I would agree.
to wrap it up, what were your overall thoughts about book versus movie? Which ones?
My final opinion is that after having all of it, having read it all and seen the movie, I like the book, but I didn't until towards the end of it because I understood. I get it. I get the picture that you're going to get a little bit here and a little bit here. And who is this? And what? And don't worry, it will all come together. I get it. Sometimes it's very annoying to have to keep track of everything until,
Mm-hmm.
however, the payoff is so whole and so complete, and I care about all of the characters. I care about the smaller characters so
Mm-hmm.
much by the end of it that it fills a hole in my soul that I didn't know I had by the end of the book.
Wow.
The movie, if I had seen it without having read the book, I would not care about this movie.
Mm. Okay.
I would have been like, okay, Obnoxious girl found an old man who wrote a good book. Great. Obnoxious girl found an obnoxious old man that wrote a book. Like, the movie fell flat for me, but because I knew the backstories of the characters, and they did stay pretty true to the characters for the most part. Because I knew all of the stuff that was in the book, and I could put it, I could say, well, she did that because of X, even though the
Yeah.
movie doesn't tell you X. Because of that, I was okay with the movie. But on its own, I would not have liked that movie.
Yeah, it does feel like you need the book to really appreciate the characters. I
Right.
do appreciate some of the stuff they did to sort of fill in the background in his past. I liked, even though I don't like how it makes her look, I do like them introducing Leo and Bruno and Svi all at the same time and seeing them
Mhm.
younger. I do like seeing her leave and him being like, "I love you," and I'll meet you there, whatever. I like that. I like
Yeah.
seeing Bruno's funeral. I
Yeah.
liked some of the stuff they did with his background. I enjoyed that, and I do appreciate them trying to put them in the same timeline. Makes a little more sense out of the chaos.
Hmm.
Um, and I think overall, it's not a bad movie, but I don't think it has the same, gravitas, the same weight, right, same feeling as the book.
Right.
I do also, I like the actor that plays Leo Gurski, and he's in a lot of Shakespeare things.
Hmm.
And he's a good actor, but I feel like I don't know if it's the script or if it's the director, but I feel like he played him a little too angry.
I also like the actor that plays Bruno. He's
Oh
super
yeah,
popular.
I
I
love
can't
that
think of
part
his
too.
name.
I thought he was great for Bruno. That's not how I saw him at all in the book, but
Me either.
like he carried the personality of the character.
I almost saw the characters flipped. I saw
Yes,
Bruno as more of this one, and I
I saw
saw,
somebody a little more like him. So in my mind, I saw Leo Gursky as like this bigger, older man,
yeah, me too.
like the Bruno character being as a smaller person, you
Yep.
know? So yeah, that could have worked too. Yeah, it's not a bad movie at all, but yeah, I think the book is better. The movie makes more sense than the book does. So you can follow the movie better, but it doesn't get the same payoff because of some of the choices that it made.
Right.
And some of the actors that played or the way they wrote the characters. Like it may not
Yeah.
even be the actor's fault. It could just be the script and the direction.
I feel like the reason that I don't like the younger Alma character, the modern Alma, I
Mhm.
think the reason I didn't like her in the movie was because I don't like the way that actress delivered. I don't like the way she spoke, the way she delivered her lines. I felt like she threw lines away. But generally, I thought the acting in this movie is pretty excellent. I was generally happy, but I would not have liked the movie overall because I would not have cared about these characters.
So this is one experience where read the book first before you watch the movie, and it will heighten your experience. And a lot of times, reading the book first ruins the experience of watching the movie. So that's what I think is so interesting about adaptations is that it can go either way.
Mhm.
So, anyways, overall I liked it. I was not sure. I was hesitant to read this book because I knew nothing about it. I'd never heard of the movie. And our first time on this show, reading something I had never heard of and hadn't seen the movie for. So I was
Yeah,
like, I don't know what did she get me into here?
I was
Um,
nervous too.
but I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm glad you suggested it because it's a good book, and there's a lot of really interesting things. And again, it's a book about a writer and his book.
Mhm.
Again, as a writer, I love that kind of stuff when writers write about writers, and I do
Yeah,
also love the fact that it's a woman that wrote it. And I gotta say, I feel like Nicole Krauss wrote men pretty darn well. Like it's surprising that this isn't a man author because
yeah.
it feels like she got men, she got Jewish men really well.
Like Leo Gursky is almost someone's like what is that called when the author is essentially writing themselves?
Yeah, so like a sort of like they're transposing themselves into the character.
You're like, oh wait, no, this is a woman that was born in like the late 70s or something like.
Well, bravo. Bravo. It's well written. It's a very good book, and it's a very good characters, and I love that. So,
Yes. Yep.
um, I do also love that his son became a writer. So that sort of
Yes.
like implies that some talents are genetic.
Hmm.
And how proud he would have been to be like, oh, my son's a writer and he's a good writer and he's a famous writer. And like that's super cool. So
Yeah.
I like that little touch.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the history of love. Um, so I went back and forth
Imagine.
on what we would do next time
Mhm.
because I have a lot of books I don't want to talk about. But I decided we're gonna do Little Women.
Yay! That was on my list.
Okay, so I have read it before, but I'm gonna read it again. And
Mhm.
this is going to be interesting because I'll tell you right off the back, I love one version of one film version of this book, and I hate the other. So,
I own four.
no, four. So I'm going to talk about two.
Okay.
Maybe I can. You tell me. You can like email me the other two, so I can figure out. Maybe I'll watch those two, and we can talk about all of them. But yeah, we'll find out next time which movie I hated and which movie I loved. And it'll be fun to reread this book because it's been a while. I do
Yes.
remember really loving this book back in the day. So for Paperback Flicks, I'm Ruth Prada,
And I'm Rae Davidson.
and we're gonna see you guys next time.